Chuck, thank you very much for that cordial and warm welcome, that wonderful introduction. After listening to it, I feel a little bit like the guy that poked his head up out of the grave on Judgment Day, and he took a look at the epitaph on the tombstone, and he said, either somebody's a big liar, I'm in the wrong hole, but thank you very much anyway. Can you all hear me in the back? If you can't, stick your hand up. I said that the other night. Some guy in the back stuck his hand up, some guy in the front said, I'll trade you. Well, to pay you back for a very cordial and warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you right off the bat that I'm not here as an expert on any deep and intellectual subjects. We'll start off even on that. I don't have the capability up here to make that kind of a presentation, and I was painfully reminded of this lack that I have in the upper story during the conduct of my hobby or avocation or weekend profession, whatever you want to call it. We were working a game over in Cleveland my first year in the National Football League, and Cleveland had a fullback, ladies. I'm glad you women are here. If we don't do another darn thing today, we're going to teach you something about football. Cleveland had a fullback by the name of Jim Brown. He was a pretty good football player. 6 foot 3 inches tall, 235 pounds, and he could run the 109.5. He was tough to bring down. And they were playing Dallas, and Brown came through the line with the ball, and the big middle linebacker for Dallas, a big bald guy. Incidentally, I notice you have a lot of fellas here in varying states of baldness. I'd like to tell you women something about bald men. These guys that are bald in front are thinkers. Now, you can all look around and see who the thinkers are. And the guys that are bald in back are lovers. Some woman in the back said he is not. Phil Atlas is the first thinking lover I've run into in a while. But it's these guys that are bald all over that you gals have to watch. They think they're lovers. Well, anyway, as I say, I don't have too much up here, and Brown came through the line with the ball, and a big middle linebacker went to tackle him, and he grabbed for anything he could get, and he got his face mask, and that isn't fair, and that's why we're out there. And I threw the flag and stopped the clock, and I told the referee, I got number 55 on the defense, pulling a face mask, personal foul, 15 yards. About that time, this guy jumped up, all 6'6", 260 pounds of him. He looked down at me, he said, what? I said, get back in there and play ball, son, before I bite your head off. And they're all real good guys, you know, and very politely he said, if you do, sir, you'll have more brains in your stomach than you have in your head. That's what he said, and also I ought to tell you what kind of a football official I am. I worked a game out in Los Angeles last year, a night game between L.A. and Minnesota, and I had a rental car over in the parking lot. Thank you. If I'd have known you were going to do that, I'd have fixed my hair. I had a rental car over in the parking lot across from the Coliseum. I went out to get in after the game and stuck the key in the lock. Some guy stepped out from behind a tree, stuck a gun in my ribs, said, stick 'em up. I put my hands up. I said, don't shoot him, just a poor official. He said, you're telling me. I saw the ball game. I was riding a flight the other day from Chicago to Dallas, a beautiful day. We get up to the cruising altitude, you know, and the captain comes on with his little sales talk. He says, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome aboard American Airlines Flight 273 nonstop to Dallas. We've reached our cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. The temperature outside the aircraft is 65 degrees below zero. The girls will be serving you coffee and sandwiches soon. Thank you for flying American. And he hit the switch, but he didn't hit it hard enough. And he turned to the co-pilot and he said, and all I want's a hot cup of coffee and a kiss from that pretty blonde stewardess. And this went out all over the airplane, see. And this little gal is sitting in the back and she starts bustling up to the front. And just as she got opposite me, there's a little old lady sitting across the aisle, and she reached out and grabbed the stewardess by the arm and said, honey, you forgot the coffee. Another thing I ought to tell you, too, is that I'm not much of a public speaker, but I do like to visit with people. I gave up reading speeches a long time ago. We lost our preacher, and the Pulpit and Staff Committee got busy looking for a new guy, and they found one. Everybody liked him. The women especially liked him because he was a handsome dog, and you could see the percentage of the congregation that was female going up every Sunday, but he had one very bad habit. He used to read all of his sermons word for word out of a little loose-leaf notebook like this, and he'd get his nose down in his notes in the morning, and he was kind of nearsighted like a football official. He'd get his nose down there and you couldn't see him. Now, when you have a problem, whether it's in the church, the community, American Gas Association, the Mid-America Gas Association, what do? Appoint a committee. And they appointed a committee to do some creative thinking about how they could get this young man to overcome this problem. They got an idea. And one Sunday morning, after he had put his loose-leaf notebook up in the pulpit, they got him out into the study on some supposed problem of the church. And while they had him out there, one of the members of the committee slipped up in the pulpit, opened up the notebook, reached in, jerked out one of the sheets, and wadded it up and stuck it in his pocket. Well, it happened that day that he was preaching on the subject of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And he was going along with his nose down in his notes, and he got down to the bottom of the page, and he said, and Adam said to Eve, and he turned the page, and he said, my goodness, there's a leaf missing. And so right then and there, I figured that never again was I going to read a speech. Well, as your chairman told you, it is my honor and privilege to be one of the staff of 53 men charged with the responsibility of officiating the 112-game schedule of the National Football League. An honor and a privilege to be a part of what I consider to be the outstanding sports spectacle on earth. This game, ladies and gentlemen, has literally captured the hearts and minds of the American public as no other game ever has, or probably ever will. Last year, in 14 regular season football games, I worked in front of 12 sellouts. One of those games was in New Orleans, between the New Orleans Saints and the Atlanta Falcons. Those two teams were in last place in their respective conferences. Their cumulative total of victories and defeats was 2 wins and 16 losses. This was not exactly the battle for the NFL championship. And when I got up on Sunday morning at the Roosevelt Hotel in New Orleans, went down to the cigar counter, I picked up a copy of the New Orleans paper, went into breakfast, opened it up to the sports sheet, and the headlines read, Super Bowl of the South to be played today. And when we kicked off at 1:05 on that sunny Sunday, there were only 83,500 people in the Sugar Bowl. You couldn't get another person in there with a shoehorn. You couldn't beg, buy, borrow, or steal a ticket. Now, I'm the line judge, ladies. The line judge plays on the line of scrimmage opposite the head linesman. The head linesman's the guy that keeps track of the downs. He has to be able to count to 4. I keep the official time of the game. You can't be a line judge if you can't tell time. Well, there was an incomplete pass over on my side, and I signaled the ball incomplete. It bounced up against the box seat railing. I went over to pick it up, and when I did, there was a little old lady in the second row with an empty seat next to her. I picked the ball up. I said, "How come the seat's empty?" She said, "It belonged to my husband, and he died." I said, "Why didn't you give away the ticket?" She said, "I tried, but all my friends were going to the funeral." That's what she said. You have to think about that one for a minute. That kind of grows on you. Add to that the fact that some 50 to 60 million Americans and Canadians watched the Super Bowl game last January between the New York Jets and the Baltimore Colts. 50 to 60 million second guessers, plus the isolated camera, stop action, videotape replay, slow motion. I'm always asked about it, so I'll tell you what I think about it. I think it's the greatest thing that ever happened to the viewing of professional football. Number one, it gives you at home an opportunity to see the game as we do, the pass patterns and so on. And number two, it has done more to elevate the official as a professional in the eyes of the viewing public than any other one thing that has happened in the history of the game. You now get the opportunity to see that we are indeed always right. We knew it all along, but you needed a little help. But think with me, seriously and in fun, if you will, for the next few minutes on this occasion of your annual sales conference, about anything that has the power to attract the attention of 75 million pair of eyes and ears at the same time. And realize with me, ladies and gentlemen, that only one other event in the history of mankind, going all the way back down through the ages, has captured that kind of an audience. And that was the tragic assassination of President Kennedy and the events that followed. 50 to 60 million people watching a football game, spanning all age ranges, both sexes, all socioeconomic groups. Question, why? Why? Because they all understand the sport? I don't think so. I think it goes much deeper than that. I think it relates to some things that we hold dear as free people, as Christian people, as salespeople. Things like a free enterprise system, respect for the law, respect for individual talent, but how that individual talent fits into the teamwork picture, and some other pretty fundamental beliefs of a free and Christian society. And so I want to talk with you a few minutes about the challenge of being a professional, because there is a challenge in being a pro in any field, whether it's in playing, coaching, officiating football, as a businessman, a salesman, and yes, ladies, the most noble profession of the whole works, that of being a housewife and a mother. And I want to ask you a few questions that relate to that challenge and relate to the theme of your meeting, sell to meet the challenge of change. And the first question I want to ask you is this: do you have recognizable, obtainable goals? One of the things that makes this sport fun to watch and fun to play, there's no question about the goal line. It's right there for everybody to see, for the fellow playing the game, for the guy watching at home on television. No question about the goal line, no question about the rewards for reaching it. Now, my question to you and to me as salespeople is this: can we put that same kind of football clarity into our own goals as professionals? Do we know where we're going, number one? And number two, can we articulate those goals with the same clarity with which we articulate that goal line in football? Now, what constitutes a touchdown in football? Wake up, ladies, your first lesson on the rules. A touchdown is scored when the ball in player possession fractures the plane of the opponent's goal line. If I'm coming from the field of play, the edge of the podium's the goal line, I'm tackled a yard short. See, I'm not going to make it. Take the ball like a loaf of bread, reach out, touch what would be a pane of glass coming up from that goal line, land on my fanny back on the 5-yard line, touchdown. We were in New York. The New York halfback came through the line with the ball on my side, full speed. The point of the ball went through the plane of the goal. A Pittsburgh linebacker hit him. He fumbled. A Pittsburgh linebacker fell on the ball. And there I am standing with my hands in the air with a touchdown signal. How to win the popularity contest. They alluded to the fact that I hadn't used my right guard that morning, but I took a couple of sniffs, and I didn't stink as bad as they said I did, because the truth of the matter is that a touchdown had been scored by rule. Now, can we put that kind of clarity into our goals for selling appliances or whatever the case may be, recognizing that sometimes goals are not reached? In a football game, you get the ball, start out, maybe you fumble, have an intercepted pass, have to punt, you got to send the defense in, get the ball back, and start all over again. Or you're fortunate enough to get a touchdown on the first time you lay your hooks on the ball. You can't quit. You have to go back and get the ball back and start all over again. I have to tell you about this kid that his goal was to go to college. Man, he wanted to go to college more than anything in the world. That's tough these days. So he takes the entrance exam near the end of his senior year in high school. 150 questions. He goes through the first 149, no problem. But the 150th question was, what's what? He thought, what's what? He thought, he couldn't figure it out, so he put down, I'm sorry, I don't know. And a week later, he was notified that he had done pretty well, but he had missed the very critical 150th question, what's what? He'd have to try again next year. So he studied for a year. The next June, he took the exam again, 149 different questions. Again, he went right through them, but the 150th question again was, what's what? He thought, what's what? Finally put down, I don't know. And a week later, he was notified that he had failed again. And a week after that, he was out on a beautiful summer sunny day with his girlfriend in his canoe. She was sitting up in the front with a very brief two-piece bikini on. He was sitting in the stern paddling, looking over toward the shore. He was a boy of character. When she leaned back to get some sun, and the buckle on the hauler of the bikini hit the side of the canoe, and it unsnapped and fell. When he heard it, he turned his eyes wide and he said, what's that? She said, what's what? He said, if I knew that, I'd be a sophomore in college. Do you have recognizable, obtainable goals? As I paused to think of something that sets some men apart, it seemed to me that goals in life must be the place to start. Imagine playing football on an unmarked field of green, not a goal line to be sought, not a goalpost to be seen. It would be an aimless battle were there nothing to be gained, without a thing to strive for, not a score to be attained. We must have purpose in our lives, for the flame that warms the soul is an everlasting vision. Every man must have his goal. Goals are a part of football, a part of business, a part of sales, and a part of life. Question number 2, are you awake to the opportunity to reach those goals? And boy, what a time for that in this time of the most rapidly changing technology that the world has ever known. We live in the age when the unbelievable is commonplace. We've got 3 guys on the way to the moon, and I didn't even watch the liftoff from Cape Kennedy, and I'll bet you didn't either. Tremendous advances in scientific technology. Advances that I don't understand. And we must be awake to opportunity if we're going to reach our goals as salesmen. Timing is a most important part of any salesman's life. I was working a football game one day, and a guy came through the line and got a thumb stuck in his eye, and a glass eye popped out on the field. I blew time out. What would you do? And they came running out with a water bucket, and he calmly picked up his glass eye and rinsed it off and put it back in, and I was impressed with his courage, and I told him so. I said, young man, I'm impressed with your courage. What would you do if you lost the other eye? He didn't even hesitate. He said, that's easy. I'd be a referee. You see, he was awake to opportunity. Now, how does watching the game teach this? The first game I ever worked in this league was on a sunny Sunday in 1964 up in Green Bay. First game of the season, Green Bay and the Chicago Bears. Beautiful day, clear blue sky, abnormally cold, brisk wind out of the north. Incidentally, that's one of the things I love about football season. Do you ever notice when you drive to the game on the weekend in football season that the sky seems a little bit bluer, the air seems a little crisper, the girls' cheeks seem a little pinker, and they seem a little younger to some of us? You guys know the definition of football season? That's the time of the year when a guy can go down the street with a blonde on one arm and a blanket on the other and nobody loses their reputation. That's football season. Well, anyway, we were in Green Bay. The Bears had the ball deep in their own territory, fourth down, punting out of their end zone against the wind. They kicked the ball. Elijah Pitts, the safety man for the Packers, number 22, stuck his hand over his head on his own 48-yard line. Ladies, one arm extended above the head as a signal for a fair catch. 3 promises made right then. He says, I promise if I catch the ball, I won't run with it. Now the guys coming down the field automatically promise, we promise if you catch the ball, we won't tackle you. And there's a third promise. That's from the officials. We say, we promise if you birds break your promise, we're going to throw the flag. That's the third promise. All right. Pitts caught the ball. That stopped the clock. I looked at the watch. There were 4 seconds left in the half, and somebody for Green Bay said, we're going to free kick. Because you see, after a fair catch, you can put the ball and play with a snap, that's this way, or with a free kick, that's like a kickoff, like you start the game. Except it differs from the kickoff that starts the game in 3 ways. 1, you don't kick it from the 40, you kick it from the mark of the catch. In this case, Green Bay's 48. 2, you cannot use a tee. Someone had to hold the ball for Paul Hornung, who was kicking then for the Packers. But it's difference number 3 that talks about being awake to opportunity, a fundamental of football and a fundamental of our free way of life. Because you see, that free kick, if it goes over the crossbar and between the uprights, it's a field goal. Counts 3 points. Well, we lined the Packers up on their own 48, the Bears 10 yards away on their own 42. Somebody held the ball for Hornung. I went down under the bar. I'm always fairly close to the bar. Hornung hit the kick, and he didn't hit it too well. It started to come down short. That brisk wind caught it, blew it. It just cleared the crossbar. Field goal, the only time it had ever been done in the history of professional football, and I had the privilege to call it, until the middle of last season, when the Chicago Bears returned the compliment to the Green Bay Packers and beat them on a 47-yard field goal by Mac Percival after a fair catch. Are you awake to opportunity? Not only when it happens, but where it happens. This guy was at another girl's apartment, you know, and she was a girlfriend of another guy, and he's sitting there with a drink, had his arm around her on the Davenport, and all of a sudden she heard a key in a lock. She says, quick, it's my boyfriend. He's got a key. You got to get out of here. He says, where's the back door? She says, I don't have one. He said, where would you like one? That's no time for a committee meeting. This gal took a walk in the woods near the end of the summer, one of those hot, humid August days. You know what? She'd been walking for a while. She was real warm, and all of a sudden she came on a beautiful pond. She took a look around. She didn't see anybody, so she took off all of her clothes and laid them in a neat pile on the bank and went in for a swim. Up home, we call that skinny dipping. And she swam around for a while till she felt refreshed. And then she started swimming back toward her clothes when she looked up, and there was a young gas appliance salesman sitting next to her clothes, picking his teeth with a straw and just grinning from ear to ear. You see, he was awake to opportunity. Well, she didn't quite know what to do, so she swam into where the water was about up to her chin, and then she waded around a little bit to think this over, when all of a sudden she stumbled on a big dish pan. You know, one of those great big ones like Grandma used to wash the dishes in before the dishwashers? She reached down under the water, covered herself with that thing, marched out, and said, young man, do you know what I think? He said, I guess I do. I guess you think there's a bottom in that old dish pan. Are you awake to opportunity? Part of your obligation as a salesman, part of your obligation as a citizen in a free nation. Question number 3, do you understand the meaning of the most abused word in the English language? And it's been used here this afternoon time after time after time. And that word is service. Service. I looked that up in the dictionary, and Webster says that service means something done for the benefit of another. And then that's followed by a great big fat period. Doesn't say anything about getting our name in the paper, picture on television, just something done for somebody else. And football is a service sport, a teamwork sport, where 11 men with different talents put them together in one common effort to put the ball in the end zone for a touchdown. Fundamentally, 11 guys on a football team get together before every game and say, we believe that 11 of us together can do a better job of putting that ball into the end zone than any one of us can do alone. And that's what life in a free society is all about. The same thing, a belief in our talents. That same sunny Sunday up in Green Bay, I'll never forget the time they ran that first sweep out around my side. That's a wide play, girls. There's no broom in that sweep that comes around this way. I'm a rookie official out here on the wings. Starr took the ball and pitched it back to Hornung. Everybody knew who he was, number 5, great halfback. But all of a sudden, I got acquainted with 2 strangers. Because out of the line came a couple of guys about 6'3" and 255 pounds apiece who can't lug a football, and they know it, but they can block, and they're proud of the talent that God gave to them as individual human beings. And out of the line came number 63 and 64 for Green Bay, Jerry Kramer and Fuzzy Thurston, offensive guards, leading the way and looking for somebody to knock down. And if you guys want to see gangbusters in action, buddy, that's it. All I knew was it wasn't going to be me if I had to climb up into the 30th row. But my point is this. If one of them's supposed to block the middle linebacker and the middle linebacker's gone for the fullback fake and he isn't there, the guy that's supposed to block him doesn't sit down and light up a cigarette because his job's done. Not so you can notice it. He looks for somebody else's man that's been missed. Service, something done for the benefit of another. And when he finds him, he doesn't say, hey, Joe, how come you missed your block? He just knocks him down. If he's got anything to say at all, he'll say it back in the huddle. That's what football is all about. Pride in talent. How does what I have fit into the teamwork picture? There's a tendency in society today, in a society that's trying to throw everybody into one barrel, shake them up and roll them all out the same, to make them all average. We're not all average. Averages are useful. The average farmer plants 67.5 acres of corn. The average woman has 2.5 kids, and I guess they're all fighting about which half they get to keep. It's kind of like the guy with his head in the oven and his feet in the refrigerator. Somebody said, how do you feel? He said, on the average, I feel pretty comfortable. But human beings are not average. They're individuals with individual likes and individual dislikes and individual successes and individual failures. And if we're to meet that challenge of change, we ought to recognize this individuality in our selling and not feel that the other guy has got the easiest job all the time. There's a craze among us mortals, which is cruel hard to name. Wheresoever you find a human, you will find the case the same. You may search among the worst of men and search among the best, but you'll find that every person is precisely like the rest. Each believes that his own call's along some other line than the one at which he's working. Take, for instance, yours or mine. From the meanest Me Too creature to the leader of the mob, there's a universal craving for the other fellow's job. There are millions of positions in this busy world today, each a drudge to him who holds it, but to him who doesn't play. Every farmer's broken-hearted because in youth he missed his call, while that same unhappy farmer is the envy of us all. Any task you care to mention is a vastly better lot than the one especial something that I happen to have got. There's but one way to smother envy's heartache and her sob. That's to keep too busy at your own to want the other fellow's job. Football is a teamwork sport, and so is life in a free society. Here in this room are people from all kinds of ethnic, racial backgrounds, religious backgrounds, but with one common purpose: to do a better job of selling within our free enterprise system, and that's what this meeting is all about. And it's our obligation to promote this individuality that we have in this society. This is the basis of our system. Here we live in the nation with 6% of the world's population, yet over half its wealth. Why? Because we have more brains than anybody else? I think that's egotistical. Because we have more natural resources? Geography teachers tell me there are places in Europe and Asia that have at least as much. What's the real reason? Well, the real reason in my book is a system of government that says that you and I have certain rights, not given to us by a king or a president, but rights given to us by Almighty God. The only nation in the history of the world to publicly confess that its people have rights given to them by an almighty creator. This is the fundamental founding rock out of which the economic system and everything else grew. And yet today, as we sit here together in Chicago, there are people who would take the words, "In God we trust," off that quarter. Take the words "under God" out of the pledge to the flag. and abolish all prayer in the public schools under the constitutional provision of the separation of church and state. Important, yes, but never intended in my book to be used to take Silent Night out of a Christmas program last winter in a high school in South Dakota. And that happened. And I'll make you one solemn promise. I'm a lousy singer, but you found out by now I'm loud. And if I'd have been in that audience, I'd have stood up and sung Silent Night all by myself at the top of my voice. And what I'm saying to you is this. Important as your production figures are, the profit and loss statement, the size of your balance sheet, the size of your mortgage, the health of your families, there's one thing that's a darn sight more important, and that's the preservation of a way of life. And we've got to make up our mind, once and for all, as loyal Americans, that a few bearded, long-haired, dirty, unshaven, stinking beatniks are not going to decide the destiny of 200 million people. That this nation was founded on the principle of equal justice under law, and it will continue to flourish only as that principle is adhered to. So don't be afraid to stand up and be counted for the United States. Sure, we've got faults, but there's a darn sight more things right about this nation than there is wrong about it. And stand up and be counted for. Did you hear about the two dogs went by the dance hall where these teenage kids are in there doing their modern dances? I have to be careful when I do this. The dogs watched for about 5 minutes, and finally one dog turned to the other one and he said, if we did that, they'd worm us. But it was out of this fundamental belief in an almighty being that the economic system that we call capitalism grew. And if you don't know the difference between the different kinds of isms, I'm going to share those with you right now. In socialism, if you have 2 cows, you give one to your neighbor. That's socialism. In communism, if you have 2 cows, you give them to the government, and the government gives you some milk. That's communism. In fascism, if you have 2 cows, you keep the cows, give the milk to the government, and then the government sells you some milk. In New Dealism, if you have 2 cows, you shoot one, milk the other one, and you pour the milk down the drain. In Nazism, if you have 2 cows, the government shoots you and keeps the cows. But in capitalism, if you have 2 cows, you sell one and buy a bull. But seriously, the growth and development of this nation, your state, and your industry is not dependent upon a chosen few. It is dependent upon the cooperation and the giving of talents of many. Football, teamwork, service. Question number 4, do you understand the meaning of successful failure? Football is a game of failure. A guy learns to get knocked down, get up, knocked down, get up, and if he keeps getting up, maybe he blocks the punt and wins the ball game in the 4th quarter. One of the plays I'll never forget in St. Louis in 1965, 17-13, Pittsburgh over the Cardinals, 37 seconds left, no timeouts left, clock stopped. Into the game came number 3 for St. Louis, Bill Gambrell, 5'10" flanker back. He split out to the right as a flanker. I'll see this play in color for the rest of my life. Faked the cornerback, got a half a step on him, leaped on the 8-yard line, made a one-handed catch of a 50-yard pass from Charlie Johnson, went into the end zone for the winning touchdown with 30 seconds left on that watch. He had dropped 3 passes earlier in the game, but everybody forgot about the 3 he dropped. The only one that was on television was the one he caught. The only one that's in the NFL highlights for 1965 was the one he caught, because he didn't commit the one true failure, the failure to get up and try just one more time. The best laid sales plan, the best laid play in football sometimes fails, but you just have to get up again. Guy was going from Chicago to Syracuse on a sleeper train. The train got into Syracuse at 5:30 in the morning. He was a sound sleeper, so he said to the porter, he said, listen, get me off this train tomorrow morning at 5:30 in Syracuse. I may swear at you, may take a swing at you. Don't make any difference. Get me off. Put my bags off after me, and here's a $5 tip. You got it? Porter said, yes, sir. He went to bed. The next morning he got up, woke up at 10 o'clock in Grand Central Terminal in New York City, and he was furious. He jumped out of his berth and ran down to the end of the car where the porter was talking to the porter from the next car. He ran up and grabbed him by the front of the shirt, and he said, listen, you, I told you to get me off this train in Syracuse. I may lose my job. I ought to hit you in the nose. Give me my $5 back. The porter, scared to death, reached in his pocket, got $5 out, gave it to him. The guy says, I'll never ride your train again. shoved him back against the wall, spun around, walked off. And the second porter said to the first porter, "Boy, was he mad." And the first porter said, "Boy, if you think he was mad, you should have seen the guy I threw off in Syracuse." Everybody tried, but the whole thing went down the drain. Two football players met after practice one night, and one of them said to the other, and he said, "You know, I dreamt in color last night. I dreamt it was my 11th birthday. So real. I came home in my dream. My mother said, 'Happy birthday.' I got chocolate cake, and I said, 'Mom, please, I want to go to scout meeting.' She said, 'Go ahead.' The other guy said, 'This is amazing.' He said, 'I had a dream like that last night, too.' He said, 'I dreamt we were in New York for a ball game. I'm sitting in the lobby of the Hilton Hotel on Saturday night, reading the newspaper, when somebody tapped me on the shoulder, and I looked up, and it was Rita Hayworth. She was gorgeous. Beautiful red gown, lovely figure.' The other guy says, 'Yeah.' She said, 'Pardon me, I just got in from London. I'm all by myself. You look like a nice guy. I thought we could have a drink and dinner, maybe go to a show.' He said, 'Man, I put that paper down on my dream, grabbed her by the hand, took her down to the dining room. We just ordered a cocktail. When up walked Ava Gardner. She was gorgeous. Low-cut yellow gown, beautiful shape.' The other guy says, 'Yeah.' She said, 'Hi, Rita. I just got in from Hollywood. I'm all by myself. Can I join you for dinner?' And he said, there I was in the dining room of the Hilton Hotel in New York City with two gorgeous movie stars. And the other guy could hardly contain himself, and he says, 'Why didn't you call me?' He said, 'I did, but your mother said you were at scout meeting.'" So sometimes the best efforts at service go for naught. Question number five, are you a motivator? Selling implies motivation. Now, I've heard lots of talks about motivation, and usually when we have one, we point out here and say, "How can I get him to do that?" But notice, when you point at somebody else, there are 3 times as many fingers pointing back this way. It's 3 times as important to motivate this guy. Are you a winner? Do you believe in what you're doing? Do you radiate enthusiasm for this industry? Somebody asked Mr. Lombardi once how he felt about winning. Here was his answer: "Winning isn't everything. It's the only thing." Did you hear about the guy that walked in the French restaurant in New York? He ordered an $8.50 lobster dinner. The waiter with the tux brought it to him, set it down. He looked at the lobster, no claws. He said, "Hey, waiter, come here." The waiter came over and he said, "Look at this lobster. $8.50 I paid for this lobster, Pierre, and no claws." And the waiter, well-trained, said, "Sir, our lobsters are so fresh that they fight each other in the kitchen." The guy picked the platter up and he said, "Take that one back and bring me a winner." And that's what you can do for me. Bring me a winner in a competitive society. Competition makes a man grow tall and straight like it does a tree. Plant 3 trees together and they grow tall and straight because they compete for the light. And it does the same thing for a human being. If you think you're beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you'd like to win but think you can't, it's almost certain you won't. If you think you'll lose, you've lost. Because out in the world you'll find success begins with a fellow's will. It's all in the state of mind. If you think you're outclassed, you are. You got to think high to rise. You got to be sure of yourself before you can ever win a prize. Life's battles don't always go to the stronger and faster man, but sooner or later the guy who wins is the guy who thinks he can. Then if you're going to motivate others, you take the knowledge of the product, put it around the psychology of the right words, relate it to the 6 reasons why people buy anything. The things people buy change in your business and everybody's business, but the reasons never change. 6 of them. Comfort, convenience, economy, durability, pride of ownership, safety. Then you relate your knowledge to those 6, talk in language that the other guy understands with this enthusiasm we talked about, and that's where the salesman is born, right there. Are you saying what you really mean, though? Saw an ad in the paper the other night. It said, "Man to sell dynamite must be willing to travel unexpectedly." Sign in front of a church, service is Sunday, 11 a.m. What is hell like? Come hear our new minister. Father came home doing some work around the house, and he said to his teenage boy, "Go get me a hammer and a screwdriver." The kid came back in about 2 minutes. He said, "I got the hammer, Dad, but I'm having trouble with the screwdriver. You got orange juice, but you're out of vodka." They're talking on 2 different levels. They're never going to get together. And then are you believable? If you know, tell me so. If you don't know, admit it, but you're going to find out. This gal took a walk in the woods. This is another one. And she saw a frog. So she reached down to catch it. The frog jumped up in her hand. She said, "You're a beautiful frog." And the frog spoke. It said, I'm not a frog at all. I'm a handsome prince. She said, oh, go on. The frog said, yes, I am. You take me home tonight, put me on your pillow, and you'll see. So she took the frog home, put it on her pillow, went to sleep. And the next morning when she awoke, there beside her lay a handsome prince. Do you believe it? Neither did her mother. Next question. Are you a wholesome, creative, positive thinker? To me, this is the most powerful force in the world, and every salesman must be an innovator. In your program, it says, innovate or else. And is that ever true? And I'm glad to see we have the women here today. Women are great positive thinkers. I often said I'd rather spend my life with a wholesome, positive sinner than a negative, straight-laced Christian. Matter of fact, I did, and I wish you could meet my wife. She's a real nice girl. But what are you doing differently this year than you did last year so you could be doing a better job next year? This is how do you make it bigger, how do you make it smaller, how do you cross-pollinate ideas? You know, we got Hiram Walkers in Peoria. Did you know they're mixing bourbon and Metrical now? You can put a load on and take it off at the same time. I used to get a sucker that big down at the store when I was growing up. How do you creatively think a lowly penny sucker? I went through O'Hare Airport the other day, saw a rotating sucker display. My sucker was still there. Then one that big and one that big and one for $15. You could just barely get through the door of the car. Some creative guy said if everybody else is going to build little suckers, I'm going to build big suckers. Maybe there are big suckers to buy them. Sure enough, there are. I bought one. You know, wars bring out the greatest in positive thinking. My war was World War II. The Germans were driving across Poland in World War II. This is the last of the Polak jokes now for you Polacks. Incidentally, you folks know who Alexander Graham Solinsky was? He was the first telephone pole. And the Polish lines stiffened. The lines were about 100 yards apart. Things got boring, and one German soldier said to the other, and he says, hey, you know any Polish names? The other guy said, yeah, Stash. He says, listen, you holler Stash. And he says, one of those Polacks sticks his head up. I'll shoot him. And all right, go ahead. Stash, up came a head, bang, he got him. Waited a couple minutes, said, try it again. Stash, up came another one, bang, got him. After about 10 of them over on the other side, one Polish soldier said to the other one, I think something's wrong. So they discussed it a bit, and he said, say, do you know any German names? The other guy said, yeah, Hans. He says, listen, you holler Hans. One of those Germans sticks his head up, I'll shoot him. Go ahead. Hans? Nothing. He said, louder. Hans? Still nothing. He says, louder yet. Oh, Hans. Voice came back from the other side. That you, Stash? Yeah. Boom. What are you doing differently? Next question. Are you up to that challenge of change? You know, as salespeople have the obligation to upset that bucket of satisfaction, to make people dissatisfied with the way things are now. Can you bring yourself up to the challenge of change? Everybody loves the rut once in a while. Some people love it all the time. I saw an ad in a personal column at home in the paper the other night. It said, 68-year-old man who smokes and drinks wants to meet 68-year-old woman who smokes and drinks. Object, smoking and drinking. He didn't want to change, and he didn't want to be associated with anybody that wanted to change. But selling demands that we be up to the challenge of change. If we're going to move these things, move new ideas, we have to change people's ideas. And then that leads me to ask you, are you then living up to your capability? Football asks men to do more than they know they can do. Willie Richardson made a catch in the Cleveland-Baltimore game, and he was interviewed afterwards. He dove and caught about a 45-yard pass. Afterwards, the interviewer on CBS television said, how did you do it? He said, I don't know. I didn't think I could catch it. People that study the human body say we don't do half of what we're capable of. Once a week over coffee, you ought to ask yourself, what more can I do? Two farmers lived across the road. They raised eggs. One guy's production was double the other one. The other one said, gee, George, how do you do it? He said, it all depends on your rooster. You got to have a good rooster. Go to the rooster auction, get you the best bird you can get. So he went to the rooster auction and bid one $500. When he wrapped foam rubber around him, drove half the speed limit going home. He got in the barnyard. He said, listen, buddy, take it easy. Eat good food. I'll boil your water. Don't run on the road. The rooster said, listen, boss, don't worry about me. Just turn me loose. I'll take care of this. He said, you don't know what your capabilities are. So the guy turned the rooster loose. About 2 hours later, he said to his wife, I got to speak to the rooster. He's working too hard. So he went out and he stopped him. He said, listen, boy, take it easy. The rooster said, boss, don't worry about me. You don't know what your capabilities are. So the next morning, farmer got up early, about 5:30. He looked out. The rooster was already up. He's after the ducks and the geese. So the farmer had to go to town to get some feed. He drives back out about 10 o'clock, and here are 3 buzzards circling lower and lower. He jumped out of his car, ran out. There was his rooster on the ground, feet up, eyes closed. He said, you dumb boob, I told you to take care of yourself. $500 I spent at about that time the rooster's eye opened. He said, would you get out of here? You're scaring the buzzards away. Are you living up? Are you living up to your capabilities? And then we tie it all together with one last question. The frosting on the cake, the bow on the Christmas package of success. Are we men and women of action? Here's where you lay it on the line. I've often said in officiating football, you can know the rule book cold. You can be in your best physical condition that a man can be in to chase these guys around on Sunday, but the real question comes when you ask yourself, am I willing to throw the flag for pass interference on the 1-yard line against the home team with the score tied, 30 seconds left in the game, and 80,000 people looking down my throat? That's the question, and that's the question in life. Are we willing to lay our talent on the line when the going gets tough? Now, how do we tie these things together? One more story, and I'm going to quit. A football team got beat. Halfback on a losing team got on a train. Pretty soon the official that made the call that he thought beat him got on and sat down right beside him. Nobody else was on the car. Everybody's flying, you know. The train took off. Pretty soon the train stopped at a small town, and a grandmother and her beautiful granddaughter got on and sat down right across the aisle. The kid is stealing glances at the pretty girl when all of a sudden the train shot into a dark tunnel. There were no lights in the tunnel, no lights in the train, and in that pitch darkness there was the sound of a kiss and then a loud slap, and the train shot out into the daylight. And the grandmother was proud for 2 reasons. First, because she had a granddaughter pretty enough to get a kiss from a stranger on a train, and she was equally proud that this girl was nice enough to have slapped the guy for his trouble. Now, the granddaughter, on the other hand, was sure that this handsome kid had tried to kiss her in the dark, had missed, and kissed her grandmother and gotten slapped. The football official, on the other hand, was sure that this halfback had tried to kiss the girl in the dark and leaned across the aisle, and she kissed her, and she, being a nice girl, had swung and missed and hit him, the official, right in the face. But the halfback was the only one on that car that really knew what happened. He had leaned over into the aisle, kissed the back of his hand, and just slapped the dickens out of the official. Did he have a goal? Clearly defined. Was he awake to the opportunity to reach his goal? You bet he was. Was he a creative, positive thinker? Could he see new ways to solve problems? You bet. Was he a man of action? The best. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is what I think professionalism is all about. In football, in business, in life. To have goals that we understand and can reach. To be awake to the opportunity to reach them. To understand the meaning of the word service, including something about what made this country great and will keep it great, and have the guts to stand up for it. To know something about successful failure, about motivating self and others, about creative, positive thinking. To be up to the challenge of change, to live up to our capabilities, and to tie them all together by being men and women of action. There are people who say, the trouble with football is it's not enough like life. As far as I'm concerned, the trouble with life is it's not enough like football. I think that I shall never see a satisfactory referee, around whose head a halo shines, whose judgment calls are just like mine, who blows his whistle as I would, and as his flag goes, I say good. Poems are made by fools like me, but only God could referee. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. You're a wonderful group, and lots of luck to you in the coming year.